All right, so picking back up as part two. So we're actually in a very cool space here. Does anybody know what this space is? I know it's in the Fighting 69th Armory in Lexington in the basement, and this was kind of designed after like some kind of old NCO club after a French tavern or a villa, something like that was kind of the idea for the folks from World War II. So very cool. So I guess one of the questions I have, well, you guys in medical, you're a different animal, right? You guys definitely, you don't yabba dabba do and punch out the clock and slide down the dinosaur like everybody else at quitting time. Sometimes you guys, and not everybody does that either. Other people do that, but have off hours. But you're almost kind of like on call. If somebody knows you or has your number, there's a good chance they don't know what your schedule is. They're just calling you because you're the one that they need to talk to. So I think you've been that for a lot of the folks that are on the mission, service members, and come through personally for myself. Even I've reached out, and as I've had contact information and had questions or things going on, or hey, did you test positive or not, or I might have symptoms. So it's been a heck of a ride. So as you look back on this time, and from where we started when this was the Wild West and nobody knew what this was, and we were going to New Rochelle and cleaning schools and doing all the craziness in the beginning to where it is now, what are some of the things that really stand out in two ways? One, as something that stands out in your minds as maybe one of the biggest challenges, and then something that you're most proud of. And anybody could speak in any order. So if anybody has something locked in.
One of the challenges that we all faced was the unknown. We really didn't know what we were coming up against. We've all been trained, yes, in medical, but in medical to combat in a war situation or in a fighting situation, or if there was for us, we're in sea burning, so if there was a chemical, biological, environmental, yes, we've been taught that, but with COVID, we really wasn't sure about the symptoms and where those symptoms were going to take you. We had a general idea, so really combating that unknown, and at the same time giving everybody who we are treating and giving support confidence and care, making sure that they know we still have their back. Even though we're all still learning this process together, we are going to make sure that we give you the best care and support and the most up-to-date knowledge. That was really a challenge that we had to do in the beginning, and really also to make sure that service members were constantly being updated with the correct information. A lot of times the news was saying one thing, command was really learning things as we were coming along, and then family members, we were within our own backyard. So there was a lot of extraneous information that was coming from all areas, and we really had to make sure that what we were giving out to our service members were information that they can rely on and be secured in knowing that knowledge. So that was a challenge. And I think as the entire Joint Task Force worked together, working with each other's strength was something that I really feel blessed to be able to have had that experience. I've learned so much learning from my fellow service members, Army, Marines, sailors, as well as airmen. I never had that opportunity within my own backyard. And I have learned a lot, not only just military-wise, but just as each individuals. There's a lot of strength, and it doesn't matter the rank. And that is something that I will definitely cherish on this mission, and I'm very grateful for. So that is something that I say that just to you, but I say it to anybody who's listening to it. We really worked hard as a team in medical, and every service member, whether they were medical, admin, finance, security forces, you guys all put up when the time was needed, and we really appreciate your strength, because without it, we wouldn't have been able to get to this part of the pandemic.
Very well put, man. Yeah.
Piggybacking on the major, what the major said, the biggest thing, and I'm sure everybody agreed, was pre-vaccine.
Yes.
Pre-vaccine was the scare in everyone. You didn't know if you were going to die. And when, especially for those of us that had to treat civilians, we had to deal with that on a constant basis because there was no vaccine, there was no medications, there was no cure. All we could do was treat the symptoms, okay, with what we had, because there was an incredible shortage of PPE, what do you call it?
We didn't have ventilators.
Ventilators, that's what I was.
We didn't know what settings to use at that time, and we were really just trying to piecemeal it together, but we kept on using everybody's knowledge as we were getting it and using that to give the support that they needed.
And treating civilians and military personnel alike that were sick, you get that extra anxiety in you because you don't know what more you can do to help them, but be by their sides and hope that they pull through, because that's basically it. And when we were sent to Elmhurst, and the lieutenant can tell you, they had to set up the refrigerator containers for all the body bags for the patients that didn't make it, okay? And yeah, that takes a toll, because you're working 16, 18-hour days with some of these nurses, God bless them, okay, that were working in garbage bags that we were using for PPE, okay? And we had sometimes, not everybody, I had a ventilator suit, you know, not everybody had those.
We used raincoats.
Yeah, raincoats. I mean, we used whatever we could, but what people don't realize, okay, is that was a stress on us as being medics, but that's why we're in the medical field, because we're there to help people, okay? And at the same token, we don't want to bring that home. So yes, we couldn't see our families. It was a sacrifice, a huge sacrifice.
Yeah.
We went months and months and months without seeing our family and kids, not because we weren't allowed, but because we didn't want to bring that to your family doorstep. We weren't sure. Right? Things eased up after the vaccine, and we were less scared. But yes, you can still come down with the virus and stuff. But you know, you weren't so much scared that you were going to die. And then treating the soldiers, okay, that we had to treat, okay, that came down with that. For a lot now, I'm an older person, okay, I've been around, I've been doing this 27 years, okay, but for a lot of the soldiers that came down, okay, a lot of them, this was their first mission. We're talking about 18 and 19-year-olds that have never been away from home, okay, this is their first experience being away from home and then coming down and getting sick. They're looking for their mommy or their father, okay, to help them out, but when they're in quarantine, we are their only resource, okay? And that was a heavy burden for me to make sure, because my concept is that nobody was going to die on my watch. So I made sure that my medics were trained, okay? And when they had to go out to the hotels, and sometimes we're talking 15, 20 patients at a time in one hotel room, okay?
It came in waves.
Yeah, exactly.
COVID positive, yeah,
COVID positive.
scary.
It's scary for them because they cannot see anybody, they can't get visitors. We had to make sure that they were fed, okay? So we were their only resource. So when
Especially in the beginning too, the service
Yes.
members themselves, they didn't know, oh my God, am I going to die? How am I going to, you know?
And each of these medics, at one point or another, had to do miles drive, 20 miles, 30 miles in.
So all of you have done this work that he's talking about at some point or another,
And then
yeah?
we dressed up in full gear because we didn't know how it would be transmitted, and just knock on the door, are you okay? Let me just talk to you for a few minutes, and just spend time just talking. You guys like talk with people, and got them out of feeling really alone and desperate and thinking this is it. Because
Exactly
a
right.
lot
That
of
was
I remember-
one of our biggest joys was to be thanked by the service member. Thank you for being here. You know, some of them would cry. You know,
I feel so alone, I'm sure, yeah.
Oh yeah, it chokes you up. It chokes you up because I remember being there with they're scared. They don't know what to do. You know, all they could do was call their friends. Well, but that was it. Okay. So we've saved lives. I can remember many a time I sent, especially I remember one in Staten Island where I got a call from one of my medics. Sarge, this guy don't look too good. Okay, and that's the whole purpose of us being there, to ensure that they were going to get proper and save their life. And yes, one of them I remember called me up and said, this guy don't look too good. We rushed him to the hospital. We didn't call an ambulance. We put him right in the van, took him right to the hospital, and we stayed with him. And he was in the hospital for a month, I remember, and we saved his life. Okay, but that's what it's all about. That is our reward.
That's
okay?
awesome.
Not in pay, but to make sure that we did our job and nobody dies on our watch.
Well, for how you just put it in those words and relayed that story, that I'm sure a lot of that is shared by many of you, that's absolutely the sting of pride as you look back on this time in your lives and your careers and say, hey, this is what you did. And I remember at Javits 1.0 when they would have, tablets and, loved ones talking on, video chat, and it might have been their last moments, you know what I mean, that they were kind of providing somebody comfort, and it was just such a strange time. And also too, I remember, hearing from previous, incident commanders across the board in different, places where this idea, when this thing kicked off, there was definitely folks and agencies, places out there that they walked in, they walked right out. They were not going to deal with this. They just said, no thanks. And the military and the medical professionals, really by and large, were the ones who just kept showing up day after day and did not turn around in 180 and walk out. And more than that, too. A lot of other folks, too, not just military and medical, but for sure, you guys. So, yeah.
If I may add
Yes.
on to that, I mean, this is the whole medical side of it, but also pushing out medical guidance and also actually giving that guidance to the field, talking to OICs and NCOICs about our policies and what the medical policies are, because that takes away the service member from their mission. Yes, we're trying to do the best for the service member, but also we're imparting their mission at all the time. So I guess it was that conflicting guidances at all time when the policies change, like Major Shreve said, then providing them the up-to-date guidances was a challenge. But also to work with the civilian employees at the sites and civilian workers, that was also a challenge too. Because
Big challenge.
not only through other military forces, but we also had to work with civilian workers and employees. They worked very differently. They had very different work ethics. So it was challenging because we had to still take care of our service member, but as you mentioned, we were there. Some of the civilian workers would leave, and we had to fill in that spot.
I'd say never before in the history of our organization, as far as the National Guard, have we ever been so infused with multiple different agencies across state and city and, civilian and joint and, that we have with this. This has been, I think, for everybody, no matter what you did on the mission. If you worked on COVID tasks, mission support at some point, you were exposed to that kind of environment, and that's extremely unique. For many of you prior to this, you may not have had the chance to work with Air Force or Army, Navy, Marine Corps, or DOH, or state police, or mayor's office, or governor's office, the chamber, on and on and on. So that was a very, very unique experience. Javits, the folks on the team at Javits were awesome too. So anyone else offer maybe a story or something from your perspective that stands out in your experience that was unique?
So to piggyback on what Lieutenant Kim said, we had an experience at the Javits Center at one point where the nurses were done for the day at 7 p.m. and I think Javits had maybe close to 1,000 people that still needed their vaccines. So what ended up happening was all of the medics that I had on my team had to be recalled, and we all just got on the vaccine floor and we just started hammering out those vaccines.
Yep.
Yep.
And we were there till about 10 p.m. and we got everybody through.
Yeah, I remember that. I was there that night. That was a crazy night of 4 hours in line for some people, and it was brutal. But yeah,
Everybody else, no one else.
it's
I'm
true.
sure there was not even a hesitancy
There
with
was no
everybody
hesitancy.
did it. They just said,
Everybody
okay,
just
let's
sit
get it
back
done.
up.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
unique thing with our population for sure. We're in the mindset of just
Get it done.
what's
When we
needed,
first
and
ending
we
up the Yankee Stadium
Oh
vaccine,
my God,
they
yes.
needed medics to mix not mix the vaccine, actually
Yeah.
draw the
Prepare
That
vaccine.
the
too.
vials.
We had to
Yeah.
prepare bottles, yeah.
We had to send medics right away. They requested, I think, as many as possible. That was the word that I received. I had to fill
Every
every
man,
man, go to Yankee
$5,
Stadium.
it was incredible.
It's funny that in so many ways, as much as people learned along the way, almost each new site and location kind of presented its own unique challenges. And those people were kind of coming at it from different ways and having different innovative solutions or ideas, or sometimes even just the location itself lent itself so perfectly to the vaccination mission. Like, for example, the aqueduct was like just the way they came in. It was like the betting window to get to get registered, and then to get your shot, and then you sit and watch the horse race. It was so perfectly outfitted for that,
The mindset, it was right in the racetrack. It was,
Yeah.
it was incredible. I remember
Yankee
that.
Stadium, I remember day one for that. It was just chaotic. You know what I mean? They opened the doors, they had line around the block, and people were showing up that didn't have an appointment. I mean, it was just so many things. It was a lot has gone on, but I mean, in the span of all that, literally millions of New Yorkers have been served in terms of the vaccination side, and then in terms of the medical and just the treatment and the testing and everything else from the very beginning. And just, I think that we very much established ourselves, which we already were, this concept as the Guard, you know, always ready, always there. I think there's no doubt about it in the minds of New Yorkers. They see us, they see this uniform, they know that, like, hey, when things hit the fan for our city, for our state, these folks, these men and women, you know, hands down, showed up in force, did not leave.
I believe that this mission actually alone, with you saying that now we are seen. I think there's been so many things and so many instances that has happened in New York and other states or whatever have you, that they'll just go to their locals, they go to their local officials on different things, and they showed that this time around, they called on us and we were there. And that alone, I think, is powerful, so.
Yeah, and everywhere. I mean, we worked with, like, the Yankee Stadium thing was definitely a partnership between city and state. You know, there were a lot of these things like that where it's just like, no matter what it was, the Guard found a way to say, you tell us what you need and we'll deliver. We'll figure it out.
In the very beginning, when they were doing the testing, that was insane. They did aerial views of cars just waiting and waiting. And they're supposed to have, before they had where they had to do the appointment. And then at the very end of it all, they're like, oh, we have to stop here. We have no more tests. So that the resources that we were given initially were not available. And that was hard. So, you know, having to deal with our higher ups at these different testing sites, like where do we get more from? Nobody had an idea. It was kind of like up in the air, and so that was also a scary like feat that we had to kind of come across. So.
And like, this being a pandemic, because I don't ever remember working in a pandemic. Okay, there were no rules. We actually developed it, and to our credit and credit to Lieutenant Kim here, we set up the standard operating procedures for the next pandemic. It's all written in stone now. Now we are better prepared for the next one, because God forbid, and we all know that eventually there may be another one. We are better prepared for it because of the experiences that we've had to go through.
And that, I think, was at every site where people were at. They started writing SOPs, standards of operation. How can we make it work at this particular site? And then based on those recommendations, then we were able to build up something for the entire task force. How unique and how wonderful it was to give a lot of juniors who really had good experience from their civilian positions and use that plus whatever their military mentoring to start developing plans that we can actually enact. A lot of times you don't get an opportunity, it's always built from the top down. This time was a chance for people who were actually on the ground to start adding and contributing to policies that were being built up in the future. That was a good opportunity that I don't know if you guys realized it, but you definitely, all your comments made it into those standards of operations that we put into action and that we've been using since the mission has been going on.
What's that saying, something along the lines of no plan survives first contact with the enemy kind of thing? You know? So I think it was definitely a little bit of that. And I think there was something, I believe they probably did, like the military does have, they had some kind of plan. But then all of a sudden it's like, hey, to the point you folks just made, we never had a pandemic that we faced before. So it's like all of a sudden you break this out and you very quickly found out what did or didn't work. And also I don't know that everything was so established to integrate with multi-agencies as quickly and as massively as we did. That probably, I can't imagine, was so detailed, but not at all. So I think that there were so many things that, you know, we take a lot of pride into what we were saying a second ago. Like before, when people saw us as the Guard, whether it's Army, Air Force, Navy, they saw the military and they saw it in terms of your state of your neighborhood or your community. You thought, okay, natural disaster. When the Hurricane Sandy hits or something like that, yeah, we count on those guys. I think now we're definitely looked at as like the multi-tool. It's like, what do you need? They'll do whatever. You need them in a hospital, you got them. You need them to drive buses, you need them to teach school, you need them to, you know, deal with it and contain the deceased and treat them with the dignity, honor, and respect for the OCME. I mean, anything and everything across the board. Yeah, the military has come through.
How proud you get when everybody just wants to, can I help? Can I do something? Tell me what I can do. And that brings back memories from 9/11 when everybody just wanted to do something, contribute. This is what happened here. Because I'm going to tell you, from experience here, we ran out of supplies.
Yeah.
The Army could not keep up with the demands because, see, we don't just do, take care of paperwork for the soldiers when they're coming on mission, coming off mission. We also provide sick call, okay? And we went through IVs and PPE. The Army couldn't keep up. And I had to reach out to other people. I had to reach out to my command, the 244th, okay, which was fantastic. I mean, the doctors
We sure.
yeah, they gave us supplies, van full of supplies. It was amazing. I made one phone call. Whatever you need, Sarge, you got it. And the lieutenant said, he came to the office one day. Oh, where'd all this stuff come from? I said, one phone call, sir. You know, and that was
That's
it.
great.
Same thing with the ambulance corps at my town. We needed a stretcher, we needed other stuff. Right? I said, we had to drive all the way to my town to pick up a stretcher, you know, but they were more than happy to give me whatever.
That's
I needed
awesome.
Because the Army, you know.
So that goes to show too an additional strength that we bring to the table that's different than active duty. That for each of you, you have whatever you do when you're not in uniform that you brought to bear here. So for Major, for yourself too, having those connections and connective tissue in the civilian world, in the medical profession,
Yeah.
in Elmhurst and whatever, and then being able to jump over into uniform and impact and have it,
Yeah.
make a difference here. For what each of you also brought to the table from your civilian life to here, and having that those relationships and experience is huge. So I think the Guard is very unique in that way compared to the other branches, for sure. So.
Peter, did you want to say something? I
Yeah, I actually have a very unique perspective as far as things that happened during the pandemic. So I was deployed when the pandemic started with 42nd Division, and we had medical control over the entire region from Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Afghanistan, and everybody was basically lost and confused as far as what was happening when the pandemic started. But being at the division element, being from New York also, which was basically ground zero, we had a lot of medical personnel like surgeons and doctors that were deployed with us that were from back here in New York. And a lot of our policies and procedures were actually that we started using overseas, and I was a medical NCOIC in Jordan, was derived from lessons that were being learned here back in New York City.
Wow.
For example, like with the hospitals where they had so many people dying based off how they were operating and not having enough medical personnel, nobody having a good idea exactly how to not get infected, how to sanitize. Doctors and nurses that were giving their opinions back to like being civilians, like in the military and doctors, they would actually reach back out to their counterparts that were deployed with us and giving us ideas of lessons learned that we actually used to help write some of our SOPs overseas. And over time, that actually helped. So believe it or not, actually what happened in New York City actually influenced a lot of procedures that we used overseas from getting information back from Air Force and Army and Navy doctors that were actually here in the Guard. That was actually helping to influence what we were doing overseas, medical-wise, to actually control COVID, the spread in Afghanistan, Jordan, Iraq, Kuwait, those type of places where we had service members. And a lot of it came back down to actually what we learned from here at Ground Zero in New York City.
Awesome.
Because we literally had a feed that we were watching with Times Square, and this was like around April of 2020. And they say it's the city that never sleeps. But for once, we were looking at in the middle of the daytime and it was empty. And ironically, some of the few people we actually saw walking down the street were actually military service.
And OCPs, yeah.
Walking literally walking.
Yeah.
And you could
I remember.
actually count them, and it was the middle of the day. So it was a very unique perspective for me to actually go through that and realize that it was a worldwide problem. But ironically enough, a lot of the things that actually helped on the other side of the world was the information that we got from service members and civilians and doctors that were back home here in New York City, and the job that they were doing to control COVID here, that we used that to actually build our policy. For me specifically in Jordan, we actually had the least rate of infections military-wise, but a lot of that came from what we learned from our guys back at MedCom, which were taking care of those policies they were getting from you guys that were on the ground, because they were developing their procedures at that time and sharing that knowledge back with
That's
our
great.
other counterparts that were from the New York Guard that was deployed with us. So
Excellent.
that was actually very unique for me to see actually happen.
I know there was a doc at the 106, the new doc, that was called down to Washington, D.C. at the beginning of the pandemic because of his knowledge of how to put multiple patients on one ventilator.
Yeah.
And his experience as Doctors Without Borders and doing stuff overseas, where you just had to make do. So, yeah, for sure, the military contributed some genuine difference makers to the entire effort. And like for us, New York City was ground zero. Elmhurst Hospital was the hardest hit. That was really ground zero. New Rochelle was the first case, right? So
Mass testing, the first
Yeah.
one for mass
I
testing.
reached out to Mount Sinai and Elmhurst, since those are my hospitals that I work at. And when I was on mission, I constantly reached out to the infectious disease team or the respiratory team or just my department, which is EMT, and head and neck. We deal with a lot of airways, and I constantly reached out to find out how residents or how doctors, attendings were managing that, and whatever information I could grab from that, I always brought it into the wing, and then eventually, when they put me out with their arrested joint task force, I tried to bring that in. Even with the vaccinations, when that started, a lot of people had confusion, and they really just didn't understand how to administer the vaccines. What was the benefit of the vaccine? How would the vaccine affect the individual? What to do if you have a reaction from the vaccine? What is considered serious? What is considered mild? It was a lot of ongoing information, and I was so fortunate to be in contact with people who were lead teams in those hospitals, so they constantly gave me great feedback. And then, of course, I had a wonderful NCOIC at that time, Sergeant Meyer over at Camp Smith, and great support from Major Dawkins and Captain Lindor over there. They were all working all the time trying to make sure that together as a team, we can make sure we can support that part of the vaccination mission. And again, coming down here over to Lexington, we had Captain Schleifer and Captain Ajabulu, Colonel
that's great,
Ortiz, lots of great people, constantly always reaching out. At the end of each day, everybody got on a phone call. We didn't have a set sync, but we all kind of reached out automatically. How are you managing that? How are you treating that?
Great.
What does your team say to do on that? Those lines of communication were always kept open. And our senior leaderships, like Colonel Golden and Colonel Rockwell, Captain Khan, they constantly made sure that the lines of communication were open so that we didn't feel like when we were at these other sites that we weren't alone as people who were NCOICs and med ops officers or senior officers, that we had support. How wonderful is that? Because I don't always know if that chain of communication is open in other situations, but here, during this pandemic, great senior leadership, great support from the juniors. I don't think I've had a single junior that I had to really track down for anything. If I said, can we do it? They said, when, where, and how fast do you need it done, ma'am.
wow, yeah.
How wonderful is that? We have such a wonderful medical team. I have nothing but excellent remarks about our team here. Here, Camp Smith, North, all the time, 100%. How can we get it done faster? How can we do it better?
Right.
When we have blank time, ma'am, what else can you teach us?
That's great. I think one of the things that for me, I remember the first grandmother we vaccinated through the jab. It's the first person,
I
and
remember that.
that was really felt like, these are the people that really need the protection the most, and we're finally getting, protection to some of these people. Because even my own parents, and I'm sure you guys felt the same and dealt with the same, that, sanitizing groceries, not even be able to contact them because they're both medically compromised, and, looking at them with the grandkids through the glass window and not even be able to, any of that. And also for you guys too, in the beginning, so many people that were just not even going near their family. Your family might have been 3 miles away, but you might as well have been deployed to Iraq. You weren't able to have contact or be around them. So I think it was really, that felt like when we first started putting those shots in arms for the elderly, most in need population that was, were medically compromised, then it felt like, that was the second win. Like we got off the canvas and we're like, now we're gonna start winning this thing. You got us down but never got us out. Pandemic, or COVID. Yeah.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now you look at, here you all are, shoulder to shoulder with no masks. We're in 2022, May of 2022. It was just Mother's Day. Yeah.
We all walk around with hand sanitizer in our
Yeah.
pocket.
But I mean, this is like
Ready to go.
this is what we've moved forward. You know, we're moving forward. We're getting back to whatever the new normal is. So how does it feel to kind of like think of that timeline and trajectory from where this began as like, you know, we're looking online before it ever hit here, and we're seeing people just drop dead in the grocery store in China, just boom. You know, we're going, oh my God, it's here, the first case here. I remember that's how I felt, right? And all of a sudden that first case that showed up here, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe it. And then just seeing the trajectory from then to like here we all are gathered. Mother's Day, I'm sure many of you enjoyed Mother's Day, and you know, lots of hugs and kisses and people around you, you know, things that we weren't doing, you know, just a short while ago.
You
What's it
certainly
feel
learn
like?
to appreciate life more and
Yes.
the people with you, because you'll be talking to them one day and they may not be around the next. So I trust me. I have 4 kids and 5 grandkids. I hope I try and tell them I love them every single day.
One thing that was relayed to me by OCME, you know, as I've talked to multiple people, and this idea that you could do a lot of things that are asked of you in the military that are extremely difficult if you have a very strong connection to purpose, like why you're here, what do you need it for, why do we need you? And if the sense and the feeling of connection to need and purpose is really strong, that person will go through hell to make things happen. The weaker that connection is, it's harder to kind of motivate yourself to get over the finish line and do these things. And I think that was something that really impressed me, like with the OCME mission, and even for you guys in medical. But a lot of times when you think of these things that are really challenging, where the clock doesn't start and stop, you know, and you know the stuff that you're being asked to do is a lot beyond what the other people are being asked to do. This sense of like, you know, I remember folks telling me, hey, I've been in 18 years, and I've never felt so strongly connected to purpose in my military career as I do now, doing this mission. And you saw these people that were just showing up and coming back again, even under the most insane conditions, and they were just doing the difficult work. And same thing with you guys in the sense of just the medical piece. What was being asked of you from the very beginning, you know, nobody knew what the definite outcome was, but yet and still you rolled up your sleeves, you showed up, you did what was asked of you, even in the face of the unknown. So hats off to you, medical team, you guys. As I've gotten a chance to know some of you, just completely impressed and super proud of the work you've done. And yeah, outstanding, well done. Thank you so much for taking the time. Any final thoughts, parting words before we kind of wrap up our discussion? And we have more time, but I figured I don't want to, you know, hold you guys hostage forever.
Glad things are getting back to normal. Don't miss the traffic.
Agent Duguay can tell you. We could literally, back then when when New York was a ghost town, we can drive from where we were to Staten Island in less than 20 minutes. Try that now.
It was a bit scary at first, yeah, to see Times
It was
Square so
weird to
desolate.
only hear sirens all the time.
Yeah.
That was the worst part, I think.
That was creepy.
And
The only thing
it
I
was
was-
super creepy.
The only thing I would say is that getting to here was initially unimaginable. Like, we
Yeah.
never thought that we would be sitting here shoulder to shoulder with each other when this all just started. So to be here now is definitely like a blessing and something that we never saw when the pandemic initially started. So we're just grateful.
Yeah, I think-
But really, this is all accomplished because we had all of you guys here. Our service member worked through this, and our service member made this come true. I mean, we invented new wheels and new policies and all of that, but it would have not implemented if service members were not in place, and if service member didn't enforce the policies.
We needed dedicated service members who understood the need before self.
Yes.
Yes.
And that is something that we all, I think, demonstrated throughout this entire pandemic. And I'm so grateful that we're at this point. And I hope that we all individually, I know we grew in some way, but we can remember those lessons of growth and pat ourselves on the back for such a good job. Job very well done. And grow from here.
I'm almost sad that it's
Continue doing
ending.
our best. I'm not sad that this mission is ending. I'm grateful because I know we're gonna
Well,
be
that-
at a,
right.
at a better place, but I am going to miss everybody
Yes.
that
Yeah.
we
Yes.
see on a daily basis. I think we've all grown as a family.
Yes.
Not just, I think all of Meadow has grown as a family.
Yeah.
Meadow being medical unit,
Yeah.
medical ops. And all the other areas, all those branches, and we've known each other and grown with each other for the last 2 years. We've cried with each other.
Yes.
We've yelled at each other.
Oh,
Yes.
We're
And,
training for the world. We're gonna-
and we supported each other during some really difficult times. And I guess my real thing is thank you. Thank you,
Yes.
everyone.
Well, thank you. You guys absolutely exemplify our motto, always ready, always there. Go Meadow.
Roger
Oh,
that.
Meadow.
Ooh,
Woo!